We're all set to roll. I know you're all set to roll. And I know you're going to give a very warm welcome to this gal because she is the first great superstar at the Continental Bears. So what more can you say? Here she is, Bette Midler.
Beside me, and my problems have all gone. There is no one to deride me. But you got to have friends. You got to have friends, yeah, to make that day last long. I have some friends, but they're gone. Something came and took them away, and from the dusk till the dawn, I hear his where I stay, standing at the end of the road, boys, waiting for my new friends to come. I don't care if I'm hungry or cold. I'm gonna get me some, because you got to have friends. You got to have friends. Yeah, you got to have friends. Friends, 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 friends. Oh, friends, you got to have friends. Oh, friends. Ooh, friends. You got to have friends, friends, friends. Oh, friends. I got some friends, but they're gone. Something came and took them away, and from the dusk till the dawn, here is where I stay, standing at the end of my road, boys, waiting for my new friends to come. I don't care if I'm hungry or cold. I'm gonna get this. You got to have friends. You got to have friends. I got me mine. I got me mine. I got me mine.
Happy Tuesday, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of Richard Skipper Celebrates. Who or what are you celebrating today? I, of course, am celebrating, to start with, Bette Midler. That, of course, very grainy and very rough clip that I got off of YouTube. Thank you to ever who posted that there. But it gives us an example of that raw talent and that raw energy at the Continental Baths here in New York, which we're going to talk about. But we're also celebrating Kevin Winkler today. And not only are we celebrating Kevin Winkler today, we are celebrating the fact that today this book is available everywhere. Congratulations, Kevin. You've been on the show before, and it's always a treat to talk with you as I'm winding this series down. And we saved the best for last.
Hi, Richard. It's great to be here with you. I'm honored that I'm your final guest.
You're not the final one. I've got one more, but you and a songwriter that's going to be on Thursday are the final guest with an S
I feel like Bette Midler when she was the final or one of the final guests on Johnny Carson's show when he signed off in 1992, which was 32 years ago today.
Do you know what else happened on this date?
No, what?
Gypsy opened on Broadway.
Oh, of course. How could I forget that?
So we've got a lot of to celebrate today. I remember that night as if it was yesterday. And we're talking, of course, about her on the Johnny Carson show, singing "One for My Baby." I cried like a baby. It was to me, those of us who grew up, I don't know how old you are, but I'm 63, and I am a product of 1960s and 70s television.
Mhm.
And Johnny Carson, of course, we had 3 networks, and those 3 networks vied for the largest demographic that they could possibly get. Where we lived, we had Johnny Carson, followed by Tom Snyder and the Tomorrow Show.
That's right.
But I was that kid that would sneak up late at night and watch the Johnny Carson show. And of course, Bette Midler was one of his favorite artists.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. She was on his show like 24 times over a 20-year period. Especially, she was on a lot of when his show was broadcast out of New York in the early 70s. And then, of course, he also asked her to open for him in Las Vegas. That was her first appearance in Las Vegas. And he was a real promoter and a supporter of her. When she won a special Tony in 1974, she asked him to present the award to her. And so there was something that kind of came full circle with him having her on his final show and her singing that iconic version of "One for My Baby and One More for the Road." That was live television at its best.
Absolutely. And didn't that win an Emmy Award?
Well, she won an Emmy Award for Best Single Musical or Variety Performance, something like that. Yes, it did.
Well, I want to, first of all, I want to talk, there's so much to dissect with this book, and there's so many areas that I want to delve into. I want to begin, I've got scrolling on the Chiron on the bottom, some of your other titles. And of course, you were last year to talk about your Tommy Tune book. You also have, to me, the definitive biography on Bob Fosse. But this book is a very different animal, if you will, from the other books that you've written. And I want to talk about that for a moment and how this book came to be.
Well, you're right. The other 2 books that I did were very much steeped in archival research and first-person interviews and so forth. This book is very different. Oxford has a kind of an informal series called Opinionated Guides, and there's
a couple of them.
You have all of them. Good for you.
Yes.
And they so there have been books on Stephen Sondheim, Barbra Streisand, Marilyn Monroe. And I was looking at, I had read a couple of them, and I read them right around the time that Bette Midler got her Kennedy Center honor at the tail end of 2021. And I remember there was a lot of press about, there's always press about the Kennedy Center honorees and their interviews and stories about them and all this. And a lot of the people who interviewed her or talked about the honor didn't seem to know much about her early days. They knew all about The Wind Beneath My Wings and the First Wives Club and Hocus Pocus and more recent things, but they really didn't know much about her origin story. And I remember thinking, as I had been reading these opinionated guides, I said, someone needs to do a book about Bette Midler. And I think it took me, 10 seconds to say, I'll do it. I'll do a book about Bette Midler. And what I wanted to do was really not delve into biography. It's not a standard biography, but I wanted to dig in and investigate her importance as a cultural figure and as a multi-platform artist, someone who has been equally successful in a variety of media, on the stage, recordings, movies, and television. And I've structured the book that way, with big sections on each of those mediums. And I wanted to do that so that it would give me the space to really luxuriate and dig deep into her accomplishments in each of those areas, and hopefully tie it together, and so that you get a kind of arc, as it were, to the book. So I think I've done that.
Have.
And
Will you say right up front, you did not interview Bette Midler, and you did not do any firsthand interviews with anyone. These are your opinions about these different areas of her life. And I want to talk about the trajectory of her life and career. First of all, your book opens with an incredible, I can't even speak, incredible chronology of her career and the highlights, good and bad, throughout the years that we've gotten to know her. I'm going to do something that they used to do on the Johnny Carson show. You remember, if a guest was on and they had appeared on another network or something, they would always say on another network, and they would never refer to another network. But I'm going to break that rule because you did an incredible interview recently with Donald Feltham. And I promoted my newsletter, so I listened to it on Sunday as I'm putting my newsletter together. And one of the things that jumped out for me, and similar situation here, was the experience of you and your mom, and the first time that she was seeing her on television. My introduction to Bette Midler, if I'm not mistaken, was around 1976 when she did her television special. Was that her first television special?
Are you talking about the HBO?
Yes.
Yeah, that was 76.
No, I'm going back to 1976.
Well, that was her. Was this the one from Cleveland?
Yes.
Yeah, that was 1976. Yeah.
Okay. And so tell us, first of all, for those who have not heard the interview, and I advise everyone to go and listen to it because a lot of clips are played throughout of her singing. But that first experience of your mom, and there's a reason why I want to go here.
Yeah. So as I was contemplating working on this book, I was talking to my mother on the telephone, and she asked me what I was working on, and I mentioned Bette Midler, and the first words out of her mouth were, "Oh, I just love her." And I said, "Mom, what is it that you like about her, that you love about her?" And she said, "Oh, she's so funny. And I love the way she sings, and I love her movies." My mother's favorite movie was The First Wives Club. And I said, "Mom, you're engaging in a little revisionist history here." And she said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I distinctly remember seeing Bette Midler on Johnny Carson's show, you and me sitting on the couch. I was a teenager. I was still living at home. And I thought she was the greatest thing on two legs. And you thought she was vulgar and trashy." Yeah, like that, vulgar and trashy. And you were particularly upset because it appeared that she didn't seem to be wearing a bra, which is a big thing with my mother. Women just did not appear without a bra. And anyway, so she thought about that for a few minutes, and she said, "Well, that was a long time ago." And I thought, exactly. How did we go from vulgar and trashy to, "Oh, I just love her," in only 50 years? How did that happen?
And a Disney star.
And a Disney star.
But I love at the beginning of your book when you talk about, and we're going to go back to the Continental Baths, as if we could. We're going to go to the Continental Baths, and then 50 years later, getting the Kennedy Center honor. And who would have thought that kind of a trajectory would happen in anyone's career?
I know, indeed. And she almost didn't play the Continental Baths. It was just sort of serendipity that she was asked to appear there 2 nights a week at 1 o'clock in the morning. I can't even imagine being up these days at 1 o'clock in the morning, but lots of people.
When I did my cabaret debut at Don't Tell Mama in 1998, I did a midnight show.
Oh my God.
And we packed them in.
Yeah.
New York is no longer the city that never sleeps. For those of you who don't live here, everything shuts down. They pull in the sidewalk. I'll go to see a show, and then afterwards I want to grab a bite to eat, or worse, when I do my own show and I want to go out to eat afterwards. It's virtually impossible to find anything in the city anymore.
No, not anymore.
It's open for a myriad of reasons. But when she performed at the Continental Baths, um, that stigma, number one, of performing for a gay audience,
Mhm.
uh, could have destroyed, some careers early on in their careers. But this gave her a chance. Of course, that's where the Divine Miss M was born,
Mhm.
and it gave her a chance to have this freedom in performing that I don't think anyone would get anywhere else. As she says in the book, one of the quotes was that if she wasn't grabbing them, they would be off having fun elsewhere.
There was too much. There was too many other things to do in that place. Yes, yes. Um, when she was hired to do the baths, she had been performing as a cabaret singer, and her act, according to her, was a kind of, as she said, a negative bluesy trip. She did a lot of torch songs. Am I Blue, 10 Cents a Dance, things like that. And she said she didn't talk much between songs. But when she got to the baths, she realized that it was a very unfocused atmosphere. They literally set her up next to the swimming pool, and there's a steam room, and people coming in and out of the steam room, and people wandering in and out. So she realized very quickly that she had to liven it up to keep people's attention. And she had a friend named Bill Hennessy, who was sometimes referred to as the Divine Mr. Gerard. He was a hairdresser,
Mhm.
and he worked at Bergdorf Goodman's, and he'd also worked on Fiddler on the Roof with her. And he started working with her to come up with bits, jokes, and bits to comedy things to do between the songs. And they came up with eventually this character, the Divine Miss M, who's sort of the other side of the coin of the Divine Mr. Gerard. And that persona really brought in strands of gay humor, feminist humor, Jewish humor, showbiz humor. And as I say in the book, there's a very distinct kind of drag queen prototype that she was kind of echoing.
And you also go on to say that many of today's drag queens have adopted a lot of material from her.
I have to tell you, a few years ago, I was in Boston, and we went to this bar near the hotel, and they were having a drag show, and I hadn't been to a drag show in years, and we went in, and it was an old school lip sync drag show with very young drag queens lip syncing their favorite. Now, when you and I were younger, they all did Barbara Streisand and Liza Minnelli and Tina
Carol
Turner
Channing.
and Carol Channing.
Yes.
These queens were doing Beyonce and I guess Lady Gaga and a lot of hip hop artists that I didn't recognize. But the MC for the show was a queen who was a little bit older, and she was totally doing Bette Midler. She was totally this kind of dishing and cajoling with the audience, very dry one-liners and put-downs. She was great at handling hecklers. So this is a kind of prototype that is evergreen, never goes out of fashion. And I think Midler, there are strands of that prototype in the Divine Miss M, certainly.
Well, speaking of evergreen, several years ago, this was when Barbara Streisand was starting to make her back to live concerts return.
Mhm.
I saw an interview with her and Larry King, and she talked about her early days starting out. She hated to audition, which is everyone knows that, and that she had this gift of this voice. And when she started singing at the Bonsoir, everybody, there were all these shows in New York, they were looking for filler, and they were looking for talent to bring her on. And I tried like the Dickens to get through to say, you're very much a product of what that time was in your life. That type of show business, that world no longer exists.
Yeah.
And the same thing with Bette Midler. I mean, the luck of the luck of the draw, so to speak, of her getting a gig such as this, which really established her with a huge gay audience right
Mhm.
from the get-go.
Yeah.
There were a couple of things. She was booked to perform somewhere. She was not selling tickets. She took out an ad. Was it
Yes.
Screw Magazine?
Yeah, yeah.
And
Upstairs at the downstairs. She was playing upstairs at the downstairs. Yeah. Uh,
and
yeah.
because of that ad, all of a sudden she was a major hit. Also, what really impressed me as someone who four walls a lot, that she rented Carnegie Hall and sold it out.
Yes, and most people, it was unusual. She didn't have a record out at that point. She was working on her first album, but it was, I have been told, that it's rather unusual to book and sell out Carnegie Hall if you don't have a larger presence in like in the music or the recording world. So it was a big deal. But that night, that was in, I think, June of 1972.
Mhm.
That was the place to be in New York. If you were part of the Cognoscenti, that was where you were that night, Carnegie Hall. She began singing in these kind of showcase cabaret rooms while she was in Fiddler on the Roof. She couldn't seem to get another job in a stage show, so she began singing these showcase cabaret rooms after her performance of Fiddler. I don't even think those are anything like that's around anymore. Are there these kind
Well,
of?
there are cabaret rooms, but you're not going to get the kind of exposure that you would get. I mean, you mentioned earlier you can't even imagine going out late at night anymore. Well, the fact of the matter is, social media has killed late
Yeah,
night in New
yeah.
York. It's just a completely different world. Uh, but I want to go back to the baths for a moment,
Mhm.
because when I think, was it late 68, 69, that Steve Ostro had opened the baths. And
Mhm.
then they got the idea to go a step further. I mean, it had, the sunroof, and so it was still there when I moved to New York in 1979.
The
And
what was still there? The
the Continental Baths.
really?
It was still there, but I never went. Um, Although I was curious. But when he got the idea of bringing talent in, uh,
Mhm.
this was pre Stonewall, and they were still
Mhm.
being raided,
Mhm.
quite frequently. And then Stonewall not only changed the way things were done, but it also gave this catapult to Bette Midler's career.
I'd say that's true. Yes, there were a lot of reasons for that. Certainly, she was a sensation, an absolute phenomenon at the Continental Baths. But there was a groundswell of publishing activity at that time. There were a number of gay newspapers and magazine bar rags
Mhm.
that I think some of them are still published, um, and they jumped on her immediately. And her first interviews, when she broke through at the Continental, were with local gay publications. So there was a very proud and proprietary air among the gay population in New York, because they felt like they had discovered her. In a sense, of course, they had. And Vito Russo,
Mhm.
the great writer and activist, um, uh, wrote had a column in one of the gay papers, and he would always was always writing about her. And he's the one we have to thank for schlepping video equipment from the Gay Activist Alliance down to the Continental Baths on Labor Day weekend in 1971, and that's how we have that footage that you just showed of her at the bat. It's historic. But anyway, it's hard to overestimate what kind of an explosion there was with her appearances at the Continental Baths. And then Ostro, who is a real character, and he deserves his own book. Actually, he actually died recently. He,
As I was reading this, I was thinking, Kevin, I think there's a book there.
he really was a character, and he saw right away that Midler was such a sensation. He decided to open the Continental to straight people, to
Mhm.
straight men and women.
And they went.
And they went. And they went. And suddenly, you know, a 1 a.m. show in a basement bathhouse where you're, you know, elbow to elbow, surrounded by, you know, almost naked men, was the hottest, hippest thing to do in New York City. And everybody, you know, everybody showed up, and more press. Andy Warhol wrote about her. Rex Reed wrote about her, and she just sort of exploded from there. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think, you know, for those who have no idea of what this world was like, I think the closest thing that we would have to that is The Ritz by Terrence McNally, which by today's standards may not be politically correct, but to me, it's still one of the funniest films ever made. But, you know, also with this, you know, later on, just to touch upon this before we move on, she's had, this is a touchy subject, but had had a couple of what I consider missteps in terms of how she's looked back on this, the pluses and the minuses. And Vito, who you mentioned just a moment ago, always kept her in line.
Yeah. She did, you know, after she became the queen of Disney in the 80s with, you know, her big film hits from Walt Disney. And also, I will have to say, in her defense, we were smack in the midst of the very worst days of the AIDS epidemic. I mean, it was horrible. It was like a Holocaust. And she, you know, she expressed some ambivalence. She said, I was part of it. I was helping to make it fun, and I have, you know, I have bad feelings about it. I can't remember exactly what she said. And Vito, who remained a friend of hers until his death, he wrote her and said, no. He said, it was fun, and you should feel good about what you did, because what you did was important, or something like that. But he was very affirming of her experience at the Continental, and I find it very moving, very touching.
You
And
know,
I think
none of us, you know, nobody knew what was on the horizon at that
no,
point.
no,
And another great book, and the band played on
right,
by Randy Schultz.
yeah,
He says something in the book that has always resonated with me. When the AIDS crisis really was raging here in New York, and it was a horrible, horrible time, a lot of the porno theaters and the bathhouses and everything started getting shut down.
mhm,
And he said that this should have been an opportunity to educate people as to what was going on, rather than hiding in the shadows, which is what so many people did. We had, first of all, it was illegal to be gay in New
yeah,
York
yeah,
up till 1968.
yeah,
And in 1969, everything changed with the Stonewall riots. Everything opened up, and this became this sexual liberation in New York, that people were no longer hiding. And then this happened,
yeah.
and it forced a lot of people to retreat back into the shadows.
Yeah, it did. Yes, it did. And something that I think needs to be said, in talking about Ostro, one of the things he wanted to do with the Continental Baths was to make a bathhouse, which many, many, many gay men in New York and other cities went to. He wanted to make it a pleasant experience, not something that was dirty and disheveled or neglected. He wanted it to be. He wanted it to be a place that was welcoming, that had a sense of community to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for many men, bathhouses, bars, certainly were a way of establishing community and connecting with other gay men. And so they served an important purpose. And as you said, we had no idea what was on the horizon. So it's history. We can't rewrite it. All we can do is look at it and learn from it. And
Well, I have a question for you, and I think that I know the answer based on reading the book. But what I'm interested in a person's career, when you step back and you look at the career, is how calculating someone is in terms of masterminding their career. And then in some people, one person that I interviewed said it's very much like being in a pinball game. Once you pull those levers, you never know where that ball is going to end up. And you may have an idea of where you want to get that ball, but it's all based on the people and the circumstances that came along. If you could talk a little bit, based on everything that you've come with this book, on how calculating she was in terms of creating the career that she has, and how much of her career was based on happenstance and the people and places and events that happened over the course of her life.
Sure. Well, there's happenstance, there's things that happen and opportunities that are presented to you, but then there's the follow through and the building from those opportunities. And I think one of the important things that happened to her in 1972, 72, 73 were the big explosion, with her exploding into the popular media. The big thing that happened to her in 72 was she began being managed by a man named Aaron Russo, who was a rock, kind of a rock nightclub impresario and talent manager. And he took her on as his only client. And they had a tumultuous relationship for many years, and eventually they parted company at the end of the decade. But he said to her, "What do you want to be?" And she said, "Make me a legend." And she later said she said, "I was so halfway joking, but what she meant was, I just don't want to be another girl singer who's just, playing the circuit. I want to be." I believe that she wanted to be an artist, and to really fulfill herself as a singer, an actor, and an artist. And she wanted him to help clear the decks so she could do that. And he did that. And he did it, and he started almost immediately when he started managing her. He moved her got her booked into rock and kind of rock, folk, pop venues. Places like the Troubadour in LA, the Hungry Eye in San Francisco, the Bitter End in New York. These were not gay venues. These were rock and folk venues, very straight. And he really helped broaden her career that way by booking her into these venues. And it turned out the rockers love camp just as much as gay guys do. They love the jokes. They loved jokes about Fredericks of Hollywood. They loved her political observations about Tricky Dicky Nixon, and so forth and so on. And he really began moving her to a broader audience, while still she still maintained the edge that she had that made her so beloved in the gay community when she started out.
And yet it took a while before the right project came along. And that, of course, was The Rose. And that was a major change in her career. And if you can take us there to that point in her career. And then, interestingly enough, that really was not the jumping off point for a great movie career right after that.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I remember the day that Jinxed opened and going and seeing it, and people.
Were you the other person in the theater with me?
You and I were the only ones there.
You and I were the only two people there. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when The Rose happened, I mean, everybody thought, wow, this is the greatest thing to hit movies since Streisand and Garland. And it just quickly fizzled out. It took a while before her career was able to be resurrected again.
Yeah. Well, during the 70s, she established herself as one of the preeminent live performers in entertainment. I mean, and she had several tours during the 1970s that were big hits. She did a world tour at the end of the decade. She did TV. She established a relationship with HBO with that first HBO special in 1976. She was recording, on and on and on. Russo really, and I'm assuming with her agreement, he really wanted to keep her off the screen until he could present her, or she could make her film debut in a role that was special, that no one else could do but her. And he did. And she did that with The Rose. I can't imagine anyone else playing that role.
No.
It just seemed like it took forever to get her to the screen. And she turned down some things in the 70s. But The Rose was a huge a huge hit. I remember seeing it at the Ziegfeld in New York.
Well, I remember
It was a smash.
before the film opened, there was a lot of speculation that she was playing Janis Joplin. And of course, that character is so much like Janis Joplin.
Mhm.
So a lot of people were expecting, up until the film opened, that they were going to see a biopic of Janis Joplin.
Yeah, yeah. Originally, that was the property was that.
Mhm.
But when Midler became involved with it, she didn't want. She thought the idea of a Joplin biopic was ghoulish because actually Joplin had only died 7 or 8 years earlier. Her memory was still very fresh, but they adjusted the film and they added some Midlerisms to it. But it was very much she was a rock, very definitely playing a rock star in the Janis Joplin mode. And I'll just want to pause and say, I feel like The Rose has become a rather neglected film. I don't know if it's streaming on any streaming platforms.
I haven't seen it in ages.
And I don't think it's the greatest movie ever made, but she gives one of the greatest performances any woman has ever done on screen. It's a
Scene where she's on in the phone booth with her father. That scene enough, to me, I said she's going to win the Oscar.
Absolutely. And she changed the way she sang. She changed the way she moved. She changed the way she talked. I mean, it was a complete characterization. And she was singing in a much different range and key and tone than she had ever sung in before. It's a truly brilliant performance. And I don't think she today gets the kind of credit that she deserves for that brilliant performance. But anyway, the show, oh, there she is. There she is. The film was a big hit. She was nominated for an Oscar. And I'll just pause here to say that I think I had a grudge against Sally Field for about 20 years.
So they liked her. They really liked her.
And then she won another one a couple of years later. I said, oh, couldn't you have just given it to Bette the first time around? Anyway, Midler said this herself. She said she thought when The Rose opened, was a big hit, that she'd just get offers of roles and she'd do this and she'd do a comedy and a drama and a music. She'd do this and that and the other. Nothing. She got no offers. I think she was, that role, that performance is so extraordinary
and raw.
I think people identified her with that and only that. And didn't, I think producers and casting people are often very nearsighted about talent. And she just didn't get any offers. She did a concert film, Divine Madness. It came out the next year. It didn't land. And then she did Jinxed, which was a major setback. And she was in danger of seeming like a one-hit wonder of a movie star, really. And right after Jinx, she did a concert tour, a brilliant concert tour. The concert was called Detour.
Mm-hmm. I remember.
Did you? Yeah, it was great. I saw it at Radio City Music Hall, and it really felt to me as if she was gaining sustenance from the response of her audience, her live performance. It really underscored that she was a theater artist at first and foremost, and that the stage was her true métier. She was talented as a film actress too, but I remember seeing that concert and thinking, even if she doesn't do any more movies, she's still the greatest live entertainer of her generation, or one of them. And she will go on. So it was really surprising. I mean, you really could have knocked me over with a feather a few years later when she became a very big movie star in a series of films, comedy films. So it was
one of, Barbra Streisand, Shirley MacLaine, Maggie Smith, Bette Midler are those actresses that if a film was coming out, I was there the first day to see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was an excitement about all of her films. When I look at her career, and I want to talk about your observations since the book, there's a great Indian parable about six blind men who come in, they encounter an elephant.
Mhm.
And each of them is touching a different part of the elephant, and they have a different experience of what that elephant is like. And
Mhm.
I think that's very much Bette Midler's career, based on there are those who were there at the very beginning, uh, seeing her at the Continental Baths and her early concerts, and
Mhm.
then her film career, which really took off, and the record career. It's like there's so many layers, and of course, as you point out, uh, Hocus Pocus is what she's going to be remembered for.
All my nieces and nephews know her from Hocus Pocus. They all, they love. They say, "Oh, she's the old. Who is she? Oh, she's the old witch in Hocus Pocus." That's their frame of reference,
Mhm.
for Bette Midler. Um, um, the what? I'm sorry. Yeah, what did you want me to? What did you want me to?
If you can talk about this trajectory of
Oh yeah,
hers, and then the turnaround, about with when she really became this bona fide movie star. A Bette Midler film made money
right. Exactly.
for a
Exactly.
while.
For a nice little period of time. Um, I'll start by telling you a story. Um, I was back. I'm from Oklahoma, and I was back visiting my mom and my family in Oklahoma in 1987. And my sister and I went to this little small theater in town near where I grew up, and we saw Outrageous Fortune with Bette and Shelley Long.
Shelley Long.
And I'd seen it already in New York, but we went to see it, and it was a Saturday night. The place was pretty full. Everybody in that theater seemed to know who Shelley Long was. They knew her from TV, from Cheers. It seemed as if the audience in that theater in Oklahoma was just discovering Bette Midler. They
Hmm.
thought she was hilariously funny, and they were. It was kind of a revelation to me that it made me realize that there were big pockets of people in the world who didn't see her stage shows. They didn't buy her records. They didn't. Maybe they saw her on TV occasionally, but they really didn't know anything about Bette Midler. And of course, they were responding enthusiastically to her humor, to her sassiness, to her brashness. Um, and that's what really struck me. And I think with the movies that she did for Disney, the very broad comedies like Ruthless People and Big Business, Outrageous Fortune, she she found a new audience, a kind of, I don't know, middle of the road audience, mainstream audience. Um, Usually at her concerts, if she did a concert in Oklahoma City, the hippest people in Oklahoma City were there for the concert. But once she did the movies, she just reached out into a broader audience, and and they clearly loved her. I was reminded of that, especially when she came back and did her first stage show after a decade, when she did Experience the Divine in 1993. Um, the audience was different. It was a different audience. There were suburbanites. There were little old ladies. There were, I don't know, church ladies.
Kevin, it was just that we got older.
Okay.
I said it was just that we got older.
I guess maybe that's the case. Maybe
Yes.
that's the case. But it did feel different.
Yes.
It did feel different. Um, and you could tell by the reaction. I think people were somewhat uh, taken aback that she would drop so many f bombs, or that she could be raunchy, delightfully so. Um, so it was she broadened her audience, and yet she was still Miss M to
She was able to have both worlds, but I want to ask you. I mean, my observation, reading the book and then going back and watching the films, which I also did. Um, Bette Midler is this, let's face it, bigger than life personality, uh, but her best work is with the right co-stars.
Mm. Um, I was, she did these very broad comedies at Disney, but I have to take exception with one of them, which the first one she did for Disney, which is Down and Out in Beverly Hills. It was written and directed by Paul Mazursky. That's a really interesting and subtle kind of social comedy. That's not unlike some of the movies that he did, like Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice, Bloom and Love. That he sort of satirizes Southern California culture, and her relationship, the chemistry that she had with Richard Dreyfuss, for instance, in that film, who plays her husband, was wonderful. It's not a braying, loud comedy like the other comedies. It's a more subtle comedy performance. I think one of the interesting things about Midler is that although she has a rather sexualized image, so many of her best co-stars were women. People like Lily Tomlin, Shelley Long, Barbara Hershey, Diane Keaton, Goldie Hawn, Trini Alva. The best thing about that poor remake of Stella Dallas that she did, Stella, the best thing about that was her relationship with Trini Alvarado, who played her daughter. They were marvelous together, wonderful. And she was terrific several years later in a movie with Helen Hunt called Then She Found Me, where she played Helen Hunt's mother. So she has
and of course, Beaches. I mean,
Beaches. Barbara Hershey, of course. I'm leaving out Beaches. So she played well with other women, and I've always thought that was an interesting byproduct of her movie career.
Writing this book, what is the one aspect that surprised you the most that you really had not thought about, or that was not really part of your consciousness until after you finished writing the book?
I think I took her appearances on television for granted. I saw her on Johnny Carson. I saw her on awards shows, on the Oscars, the Grammys. I saw her specials, the things that she did for HBO. But I have to tell you, that chapter was the most fun chapter for me to write. I enjoyed kind of revisiting her television appearances, and it's the talk show appearances. She just struck me as she's just such wonderful company. She's an articulate, informed individual who knows about the world. She knows she's engaged with the world, and she's funny. She can interact with anyone. Her chemistry with Johnny Carson, we can all acknowledge, but she was great with. I remember going back and looking at a clip of her on the Dinah Shore show, her Dinah Shore's afternoon show, and they just talked together like they were just old friends. Dinah Shore's 30 years older than her. She's old enough to be her mother, and yet they just talked like they'd been friends for years.
And then there are these other areas of her life. Sorry to interrupt, but her marriage, which has lasted, and then the work that she's done in New York as far with the New York Restoration Project. It's like she keeps constantly reinventing herself.
Yeah, and as I said, she's engaged with the world. She's not in her own silo, a silo of privilege or anything. She's out there. So that was something. I won't say it was a revelation, but it was a wonderful kind of rediscovery about how delightful she was as a talk show guest and as a personality in the public arena. I was also I knew this, but I was reminded of it again. She's also a writer. She's written 3 books. She has contributed in significant ways to all of her stage shows. She's directed her stage shows. She's written or co-written them. I've discovered in researching that she she and one of her collaborators, Jerry Blatt, rewrote monologues that she used in The Rose. That I didn't know about. The other thing that was so interesting, again, I knew this, but it was great to be reminded of it, was that she was always very generous in acknowledging the people who helped her along the way.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly, many of her colleagues and mentors have been gay men, and she acknowledges them. People like Bill Hennessy, Ben Gillespie, very early on, Jerry Blatt. All these men are gone now. Bruce Vilanch, Mark Shaman, who played such an important role in her musical profile. Barry Manilow, certainly, and she seems to me someone who appreciates other people's talents and skills and is not intimidated by them, but wants to collaborate with them.
A friend of mine was in Dolly with her, Kevin Lagun, and he said the first day, the first table read, she came in and she said, some of you are better singers than I am. Many of you are better dancers than I am. Many of you are better actors than I am, but none of you have the total package that I have.
Absolutely right.
And she was saying it as a joke, but she won everyone over at that moment. And she truly did not come into the theater acting like the diva. She came in and she truly wanted to be part of the company.
Yeah. There's some footage on YouTube of her doing a rehearsal, like a put-in rehearsal for one of her tours in the 90s, and it just struck me. It's just a start and stop rehearsal, and I think it's just with piano. It just struck me that she was a workhorse.
Mm-hmm.
She's there. She's a professional. She's got her lines. Things are scripted, and of course she has a wonderful improvisatory way of delivering scripted lines. She's someone who values collaboration and the whole process of making theater with other people, and that anecdote certainly underscores that.
So what was your starting off point? How did you start this project?
Well, first thing I did, I'm a librarian and an archivist, so I keep files on people I like. So I had a clipping file, probably about, that thick,
wow,
of clips that I'd clipped out of newspapers and magazines about her forever. I organized them chronologically, I organized them roughly by theater, recordings, television, movies, so forth. And then I started looking at her work. I looked at a lot of stuff on YouTube. I revisited all of her movies. I kind of immersed myself in her recorded legacy. I think for about a year, I don't think I listened to anything. That's not completely true, but for about a year, I listened to a steady diet of Midler. So I started by sort of immersing myself in her work, and then started to kind of organize it into these specific little piles. My original plan was to do this chronologically, and it felt muddied somehow. It didn't feel right to me. But putting it into theater, recording, TV, movie piles helped me clarify my thinking.
Well, you're one of my favorite writers, and I'm not just saying that because you're here, but every book that comes out, I look forward to. If you were just an automaton or something, just churning them out like this, you'd make us a lot happier. But
I'm tired.
I know. There are a couple of things. We're going to wrap this up in just a moment because I want to be respectful of your time and everyone else who's watching. But is the book that I hold in my hand, which a couple of things that I want to say. number one, everyone reach out to your favorite bookseller and request this book. It's on Bette Midler, An Opinionated Guide. If they don't have it, request that they get it. Do the same thing with your local library. Make sure that it's on the library shelves so that people can, continue to carry it around. Is this the book that you set out to write, or did it have a life of its own?
It is the book I set out to write. It took on colors and flavors that I didn't quite anticipate when I started, but I think it pretty much is the book I started out to write. I'm pretty happy with it. I hope if Bette reads, I know Oxford sent an advanced copy to her, so I hope if she reads it, I hope she likes it.
Well, what I will do is I will send this video after it's finished to her publicist. We love you, Bette. Just know that.
We love her.
Yes, absolutely love her. I'm going to tell you an anecdote. Then I'm going to give you a chance to have your final word. It could be about anything that we spoke about today, anything that we didn't talk about, anything that you wish we had, or just any final message you want to leave everyone with. In honor of this being the anniversary of Gypsy opening on Broadway, I'm going to show a clip of Bette Midler's Gypsy. And if you want to know about Kevin's opinions on this, get the book. So
we will say no more.
So the opening night of Hello, Dolly, I wanted desperately to go to the opening night, and it was invitation only. And I posted on Facebook that I desperately wanted to go. And a woman, Eileen Slater, she has since passed away, she reached out to me and she's, I'm going to find a way to get you there. Then she found out that it was that they were going to auction off 2 tickets to the opening night and the after party. And this was to benefit the New York Restoration Project. Mm-hmm. So she says, I'm going to bid on this and we're going to go. In the meantime, I won a contest with Turner Classic Movies, and I am on the West Coast on the red carpet. I'm presenting Jezebel at Grauman's Chinese Theater, and my phone is going bzzz, bzzz, every time there was another bid. And I was losing my mind. And it went from like $500 to $1,000, $1,500. And it kept going up and up and up. And I wrote to her and I said, you have to stop. As much as I want to see the show, this is crazy. She said, no, my accountant loves me. We're going to do this. So she kept bidding and she won the tickets. And I went to the opening night of Hello, Dolly. I was in the front row at the Schubert Theater. And the tickets were, sit back, $14,700.
Oh my God, a piece?
For the 2.
For the 2. Oh, that's
for the 2.
Wow.
So after she wins this, I get an email from a friend of mine who says to me, I was trying to get you tickets, but somebody was bidding against me. It's great to have friends.
You gotta have friends.
So I want to give my closing remarks. Everyone, thank you for watching not only today, but on and on and on. We've done 1,000 of these. And as Kevin said, I'm tired. I want to focus on my live work. That's why I am closing this down. You never say never, never, never. You never know if Bette Midler calls and says, Richard, I want to do an interview with you. I'm coming out of my self-imposed retirement to do it. Yeah. But every show I've done, I've ended with this message. Go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. Go to your Facebook friends list and go to the second name that pops up. And what I want you to do is I want you to reach out to that person with a phone call. Not an email message, not a text message, not a private inbox message, a phone call. And let that person know the impact that they've made on your life. Then there's another part to this. Order 2 copies of this. Keep one for yourself and send the second copy to that friend that you just reached out to. And let them know really that they've made a difference in your life. I have a dear friend, Sean Moniger, and he says, we're all in the same storm, but we're in different size boats. And I always say, I don't care what size boat you're on, as long as you have a skipper by your side. And with that, I'm going to leave. I'm turning it over to you, Kevin. And when you say goodbye, I will end with a little surprise for everyone. So thank you so much, and it's all yours.
Richard, thank you. And my message is a note of thanks to you. This show that you've been doing, I don't know how long you've been doing it. It's become kind of appointment viewing for me. This show has brought together so many people from diverse communities. I think you started, I may be wrong, but I think you started focusing on theater people, but you've expanded to include writers and people in politics and culture and so forth. And it's really been wonderful what you've done. It's like that image of someone dropping a pebble in a pool of water, and everything just ripples out from that pebble. You have been that pebble that have rippled out into so many people's lives, and you've kept us informed, you've kept us entertained, and I'm going to miss you. Not just as a platform to come on and talk about a book, but as an opportunity to learn something and to get to spend some time with you. So I thank you for that, Richard, and I really hope you enjoy a very well-deserved leisure time. Thanks a lot.
Mama, how come I have 3 fathers?
Because you're lucky. You were born with a call. That means you have the powers to read palms and tell fortunes, and wonderful things are going to happen to you.
Why do you fill her with such bunk?
It ain't bunk.
Nothing wonderful is going to happen to her or to June or to you.
Maybe not to me, but they're going to have a marvelous time. I'll be damned if I'll let them sift their lives away like I did, or like you do, with only that calendar on the wall to tell you one day from the next, or that plaque from your rotten railroad company to say, congratulations, for 50 years you did the same dull thing every dull day.
That plaque is a great tribute, is solid gold.
How much could you get for it?
Rose, if you ever...
Well, what good's it doing sitting up there?
That plaque belongs there like you belong home.
Oh! Anybody that stays home is dead. If I die, it won't be from sitting. It'll be from fighting to get up and get out. Some people can get a thrill knitting sweaters and sitting still. That's okay for some people who don't know they're alive. Some people can thrive and bloom, living life in a living room. That's perfect for some people of 105. But I at least gotta try. When I think of all the sights that I gotta see at all the places I gotta play, all the things that I gotta be at. Come on, Papa, what do you say? Some people can be content playing bingo and paying rent. That's peachy for some people, for some humdrum people to be. But some people ain't me. I had a dream, a wonderful dream, Papa. All about June and the Orpheum Circuit. Give me a chance and I know I can work it. I had a dream, just as real as can be, Papa. There I was in Mr. Orpheum's office, and he was saying to me, Rose, get yourself some new orchestrations, new routines, and red velvet curtains. Get a feathered hat for the baby, photographs in front of the theater. Get an agent, and in jig time you'll be being booked in the big time. Oh, what a dream, a wonderful dream, Papa. And all that I need is 88 bucks, Papa. That's what he said, Papa. Only 88 bucks.
You ain't getting 88 cents from me, Rose.
Well, I'll get it someplace else. But I'll get it and get my kids out. Goodbye to blueberry pie. Good riddance to all the socials I had to go to all the lodges I had a play, all the Shriners I said hello to. Hey, LA, I'm coming your way. Some people sit on their butts, got the dream, yeah, but not the guts. That's living for some people, for some humdrum people, I suppose.